So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Susan Carney is a Director of Marketing and Communications for Mcity at the University of Michigan, overseeing strategy, planning, and execution of media relations, digital and social media, and thought leadership initiatives. Carney arrived at U of M in 2015 from Burson Marsteller, which was an integrated communications agency where she was part of a team supporting Ford Motor Company's communications. As editor-in-chief of Ford's internal newsroom, Carney manages a team responsible for creating written and visual materials about Ford for distribution across the media landscape, print, broadcast, digital, and social. Carney is a former journalist and has served more than a decade as a reporter and editor for the Detroit News, including directing the news award-winning auto industry coverage. Her latest role at the paper was business editor before joining Burson Marsteller in 2011. As a Detroit native, Carney earned her bachelor's degree in history from the University of Michigan Dearborn and a master's degree in journalism from Columbia University in New York. With that, please welcome Sue Carney.
Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm not hearing any echo. So as he said, first of all, I'm just going to say that I did not use ChatGPT in the creation of my slides. I did not use, and we are going to talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and everything he said about the great amounts of data it requires with ChatGPT. Whenever I say data in relation to what I'm going to be talking about, think the same thing. We use huge amounts of data to train AI autonomous vehicle algorithms. So with that, so before I go further though, I want to ask a couple of questions. Who has been to the Mcity test facility? And so a lot of you have been on the tour. I hope I don't repeat myself too much. And who has ridden in an AV? Okay, that's a far smaller number. Who's not sure they want to ride in an AV? And that's an even larger number. That last question is one that I'll address as we go along. But first, I want to give you a little bit of a background on how University of Michigan is approaching mobility. The university being located where it is in Southeast Michigan, the hub of automotive forever, has much going on in the mobility space, Mcity being one of them. So I'm going to do that by showing you first a video.
Innovations in mobility and transportation impact more than how we move people and goods. They underpin our economy, national security, personal freedom, and well-being. At the University of Michigan, we're bringing together expertise from across campus and beyond to chart a path for continued leadership and build a future that's safe, resilient, and secure. Mobility at Michigan is our expansive, established ecosystem of innovation that builds on more than 100 years of influential research. From advancing child restraint systems to leading one of the world's largest deployments of connected vehicles and infrastructure, our rigorous research informs global safety practices.
Resume control.
Within our mobility makerspace, we have the world's first purpose-built proving ground for testing connected and automated vehicles. And it's equipped with an open-source digital twin and remote access, so researchers anywhere in the world can use the facility without leaving their labs. Here at Michigan, we host the U.S. Army Center of Excellence for Autonomous Ground Vehicles. Our research leads to new, innovative systems for military operations, disaster relief, planetary exploration, and other challenging off-road environments. By integrating physical and digital testing, cutting-edge AI, and human-machine teaming, We are not just engineering vehicles, we are shaping the future of digital engineering and transportation. Partnering with industry, we're advancing electric vehicle technology and growing the next generation workforce, thanks to a $130 million investment from the state of Michigan. And we're expanding our battery lab with cutting-edge tools for academic and industry researchers. We're at the forefront of improving propulsion technologies in automotive controls, combustion thermodynamics, fuels, and batteries. Our researchers continue to lead in improving engine efficiency, hybrid powertrains, low-carbon fuels, and more. With over 120 researchers and $600 million in mobility research expenditures over the last 5 years, the University of Michigan is reimagining the future of transportation. Join us. Innovations in mobility and
The clicker's not working for what it's worth. So, building on the great University of Michigan brand, well-established, Mcity, which has only been around for 10 years, well, since 2013 if you talk about when we were founded, but 2015 with the opening of the test facility, we have already established Mcity as a mobility leader within that U of M firmament. So even though we didn't get a lot of screen time in that video, we are one of the university's mobility leaders and one of U of M's most recognized brands. I'm going to try to, there we go. So Mcity was established really as mobility was transforming. And this is not the first time that mobility has transformed over the centuries. In this photo from 1900, there's no vehicle in sight, no car in sight. These are all horse-powered, not horsepower, but horse-powered. But a brief 13 years later, there are mostly cars. That's how quickly things can change. But with that transition to motor vehicles have come unintended consequences. Streets are less safe for pedestrians and cyclists. Traffic jams are common. The convenience of cars has enabled massive urban sprawl. And of course, there's pollution. But there's also an opportunity for transformation to address those consequences with things like pedestrian-friendly streets, shared modes of transportation, accessible cities for all, cleaner cities. Mcity is helping to lead that change. So what is Mcity? As I mentioned, we were founded in 2013 as an interdisciplinary public-private partnership. I'll admit, when I came here in 2015, and they said to me, this is an interdisciplinary public-private partnership, I said, okay, what does that mean? Since then, more than 140 companies have worked with us as members of the partnership. And over time, we have expanded our offerings beyond the test facility, beyond the research that we've funded, and we've grown into a makerspace for mobility innovation. Our test facility launched as the world's first purpose-built proving ground. I didn't get to practice. For connected and autonomous vehicles and technologies, and it is still the most advanced. We built an AI data engine to help train AV algorithms, what I referenced earlier when we talked about all the data. And we now offer mixed reality remote testing options. What has not changed over the years is our vision. A new world for mobility that dramatically improves transportation safety and efficiency for the benefit of society. We've adapted, as I mentioned, we're a public-private partnership. In our first 2015, first 8 years of existence, we were largely funded by our industry members. In the beginning, we had some funding from the university. We had some funding from MDOT, but we evolved into fully member-supported. We have now expanded that membership model And we're working with our partners to pursue funding at all levels of government, which was not a focus of ours in the beginning. Now you're probably saying, well, is this the best time to start doing that? But I will say that we have received about $50 million in government grants in the last 3 years. None of those have been compromised by the cuts in research, other than some of the indirect cost cuts. And of course, we do feel it through, as the College of Engineering, which we're part of, as the university feels that pressure, it comes to bear on all units, as you all know. And so we will do our part as we can do our part. But for now, we have funding from all of the sources that you see there: NSF, USDOT, NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is part of USDOT, MDOT, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Oakland County Road Commission, City of Ann Arbor. So we look to work with government at all levels. So what's next for Mcity? First, let's talk about the biggest change in our history. And where is the tree, gentlemen? That's you, right? The change came March 1st of this year, when Mcity became part of the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute. People have long thought we were already part of UMTRI, but we were not. But UMTRI, which is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year, is a leader in transportation safety research, from advancing child restraint systems to leading, today still, one of the world's largest deployments of connected vehicles. And what connected vehicles are: vehicles that can talk to each other, share data with each other, share data with the infrastructure, issue warnings, avoid dangerous scenarios on the road. That's one use of connected technology. Mcity this year is marking our 10th anniversary of the test facility. And this was, at the time, and we launched specifically focused on connected and automated vehicles and technologies. The test facility was a proving ground, purpose-built for those vehicles and technologies. At the time, it was the most innovative and experiential research. Since then, though, we have evolved, as I've said earlier, into a makerspace for mobility innovation, with everything from vehicle testing. I'm sorry, the computer is. Just for everything from vehicle testing methods to smart city technologies and much, much more. Bringing Mcity and UMTRI together into one organization basically fuses UMTRI's long-standing strength in transportation safety with Mcity's unique expertise in testing and connected and automated vehicle technology development. With the combination, we're multiplying our impact, and this will bolster our research in next generation technologies that save lives. So this is a huge deal for Mcity and for UMTRI. It was important to the College of Engineering. 10 years ago when Mcity opened, I don't think anyone ever thought we would become part of UMTRI, but we will soon move into the building, and we will become one unit focused on making traffic and safety priority number one. So let's take a closer look at all that Mcity offers as a makerspace. While it's important to remember that the scientific challenges have slowed down the rollout of autonomous vehicles in large numbers, and those have not yet been resolved. AI is accelerating us toward a breakthrough. We can see that coming in our own research. But because we haven't seen the broad rollout of AVs, largely because of safety issues and safety fears on the part of, not that there aren't basic science questions that need to be answered, and those are being pursued at Mcity and elsewhere. But the biggest hurdle to getting AVs on the road in large numbers, which is what's required to achieve the dramatic kind of benefit that they can bring, is we don't have enough people who want to get in them and ride them on a regular basis. So Again, Mcity we're probably best known for the Mcity test facility. It has roads and traffic signals, and you've all been out there, so you know what it looks like. But it has evolved as we have integrated AI and enabled testing approaches that were only ideas, scraps of ideas, a decade ago. So that includes things like a digital twin, mixed reality, high-speed cloud communications for data exchange, even a tool that virtually introduces adversity into testing scenarios. And more about all that in a minute. One notable change since 2015 is that the test facility is not limited to vehicle technology work. We have several projects going on that reflect its ability to be thought of as a smart city prototype. So we have an inductive wireless charging, which is on your left. Those two photos on the left, which was installed at the test facility. It is basically charging technology for electric vehicles that is built into the road. The vehicle drives over it and charges as it drives over it, which is game-changing technology in the EV space, because one of the big concerns with EVs is range anxiety and not having enough charge, not having enough power. So we were the test site for this technology before it was installed along a stretch of highway in the city of Detroit. We also have a professor at the university who looks at climate change and the impact, excuse me, on water and water usage. And he uses the big retaining pond that we have at the test facility, and he's basically looking at how can you autonomize water recovery from big events like big rainfalls. And then along the bottom is something called jointless ECC pavement, and I will not bore you with what ECC stands for, but what the gist of this is that it's pavement that has no joints. So every place when you go on the road and there's a piece of pavement that meets another piece of pavement, and it's a little bump you have to go over, or sometimes that's where it cracks or that's where it breaks up. This avoids that. And in doing so, it helps the roads to last longer, it's easier on your cars, so it's efficiency in many different ways. So just an example of some of the things that we're doing that go beyond autonomous vehicles. Still, the most significant advancements at Mcity have come in our testing capabilities as they relate to autonomous vehicles particularly. 2 years ago, we introduced what we call the next generation autonomous vehicle test facility, thinking of the Mcity existing test facility as first generation. We called it Mcity 2.0. I know, terrible nomenclature, but that's what NSF called it, and they funded it. So with generous funding from the National Science Foundation, we built basically digital infrastructure that works with think of it as overlaying the physical infrastructure of the test facility and enables remote use of the test facility. So you can be, and we have had, a professor in West Lafayette, Indiana at Purdue who has developed AI algorithms and needs to test them. But he doesn't have a research vehicle, he doesn't have a test facility. So what he was able to do using our Mcity 2.0 infrastructure was work from his computer in West Lafayette, develop his algorithm, send his algorithms to us. We enter them into one of our research vehicles at the test facility and run the algorithm on the physical test track. And he can be there to watch it in person, or he can watch it from his lab, which is what he chose to do. And he gets the feedback that he needs to then go back and iterate on his algorithm, adjust it as necessary, and then come back and do it again. So the graphic is a little complicated, but the complexity kind of makes a point. Getting AVs right is hard, and it's complicated. Simulation is really at the heart of Mcity 2.0. So what you're seeing in this video is, on the far left, you're seeing simulation, which shows a test vehicle in red in the middle, and you're seeing virtual vehicles, which are yellow, around it. But then the center image shows the on-screen view from inside, on a screen inside a test vehicle, with surrounding traffic, but the surrounding traffic is blue boxes. So you don't know if that's a truck or a SUV or a bicycle or a car. You don't know. So if you go over to the third panel, this is the augmented view. The upper image is the real physical test facility. The bottom image is that same real portion of the test facility with digitally created vehicles. And those vehicles through our system can interact and respond to each other through communications, through data, so they're not just there randomly. Another valuable tool that Mcity has created, and this is even more recent than 2.0, is what we call the Mcity Digital Twin. How many engineers do we have in the audience? 2, 3, 4, 5. People who don't want to admit it. So you're familiar with the use of digital twins in a variety of different engineering applications. They're used in manufacturing often. So the digital twin of the test facility is a digital representation of the physical test facility. And with the digital twin, researchers can, just like with 2.0, they can test and modify and retest their AV algorithms, not only without ever coming to Ann Arbor, but without ever using a physical test facility or a physical vehicle. We're working with NVIDIA, which has something called an Omniverse platform, to close the divide between the simulated world and the real world. That's called the sim to real gap. And that is a description of the sometimes not so subtle differences between the simulated world and the real world that have made some researchers say you can't rely on simulation for testing autonomous vehicles. They're just not enough like the real world. But I want to show you this video. And this is the Omniverse, a fly-through of the Omniverse digital twin of the Mcity test facility. Now, in your mind, remember what it looked like when you were there. Pretty darn realistic. There are a number of digital twins of Mcity that have been created, but this is probably, at this moment, the best. And it really adds to what we can offer to researchers, whether they're in academia or they're in industry or wherever they might be. Believe it or not, people who have never been to the test facility before, sometimes they go up that stretch of road and think they can really get on I-75 there because that's what the sign says. The digital twin works with something called TerraSim, which Mcity researchers created. It's an open source, as is the digital twin, which means it's free and available to anyone, anywhere. And it's an open source traffic simulator that generates realistic driving scenarios as well as safety critical driving scenarios for testing and simulation. So if you're looking at the one on your left is a normal driving environment. So you're not seeing any near misses or actual collisions. You look at the one on the right and you see where the simulation has been created such that a collision does occur. Using a digital version of a test facility or digital traffic that is modeled, the scenarios that are developed are based on data, largely data that has come out of the city of Ann Arbor. Some of you may have participated in something called the Safety Pilot Model Deployment 10 or 12 or 15 years ago, where you came to UMTRI and you got a piece of equipment installed on your vehicle so that it could gather data. I don't think it emitted data. This was before my time, but I think it gathered data. And so the driving scenarios that we have through TerraSim are real, and they're based on those scenarios that are most likely to cause crashes, fatalities, and the like. And using this digital approach means you don't have to, if you didn't do it this way, you'd have to go out and wait for these things to happen in real time. which would take forever times forever. And we can accelerate testing by 10,000 times using this digital approach. So really, the list of things you can do at Mcity is almost limitless, as long as you're as deep as your imagination can go. I've listed here just some of them: testing connected and automated and EV technology, developing AI algorithms, building out new wireless technologies, prototyping advanced roadway materials, like we talked about a second ago, conducting remote testing with Mcity 2.0, conducting early stage development and testing of tomorrow's technology before they hit the road, exploring net zero solutions for sustainable smart communities, testing first mile, last mile capabilities. That is if that's not a term you're familiar with, there might be a great bus that you can take to your doctor's office, but if you don't have a way to get from your house to the bus, you're in trouble. So that's first mile, last mile, and that's one of the most challenging issues in making transportation widely available to all. And then, of course, we also, as you all have experienced, or most of you, conduct demos and test drives and tours so that we can help people to learn more about where we think mobility and transportation is going. So I want to talk a little bit about now some of the specific projects that we're in the middle of working on right now. First up is the Mcity Safety Assessment Program, and I think that chuckle was generated by the headline and image that is with the story, which is, it doesn't say this here, but it was in the Wall Street Journal by the technology columnist whose name is Christopher Mims. How will we know when self-driving cars are safe? When they can handle the world's worst drivers. So our faculty, Henry Liu, who is a professor of civil and environmental engineering, also mechanical engineering. He is now the director of UMTRI. He was the director of Mcity. He's done a lot of his own research in this area, and his work with his research team into how to do testing and simulation was featured as a cover story on Nature. And on Nature, not with anything else attached to it, the real central Nature magazine, which as members of the academic community, you know is a big deal. And so that in the scientific and academic world, along with getting coverage in places like the Wall Street Journal, is how we get our message out about what's possible and what we're doing. Because we know that one of the technologies that holds the greatest potential for making our roads safer is autonomous vehicles. A large percentage of fatalities on the road are the result of drunk driving or speeding or both. AVs do neither. But one of the most challenging barriers, as I mentioned earlier, is consumer fears, consumer distrust. But consumers must feel confident that the technology is safe before AVs can help us realize the dramatic gains they promise, not just in safety, but in things like, I know this is not something we talk about a lot, but efficiency and sustainability anymore, as well as making transportation available to all. So consumers must feel confident that the technology is safe before AVs can help us realize all of that. In just the last 2 weeks, Waymo and Zoox launched recalls of their robo-taxis. If you're familiar with, are you all familiar with Waymo? And they run robo-taxi services in a number of cities, including San Francisco, Austin, Texas, warm states that don't have snow. And Zoox also runs robo-taxis with a slightly different take on it than Waymo. And then last year, of course, GM, their cruise division, was operating in San Francisco, and the vehicle dragged a woman without realizing it was dragging a woman. So all of those things feed into consumer fears and distrust, which totally makes sense. So what we are trying to do, and actually consumers are listening. They read, they listen. AAA does an annual survey study into AV and consumer attitudes towards AVs. They are still, the vast majority of people are afraid to ride in them, even though they also prioritize safety technology as what automakers and industry should work on. So here we have this technology that we know can save lives, but consumers don't trust it for reasons that are understandable. In real numbers, nearly 40,000 people are killed on US roads annually. And consumer trust in AVs began declining. We've seen no change in that number since AVs were been in fact, fatalities went up during the pandemic. Consumer trust in AVs began declining, though, with the first fatalities in 2018 in Arizona and California. Before that, consumers were very optimistic about how this might help their lives. So Mcity and our industry partners in the partnership saw this happening and said, what can we do? How can we address consumer fears about this technology? And so we developed what we call the Mcity Safety Assessment Program. And this is a two-part program. The first part is what we call a driver's license test. And it serves the same purpose as when you and I and everybody, when we were 16 or whatever age you were when you got your driver's license, had to go and demonstrate that you know how to drive and you know what the road rules are, and you did a road test and you got your license. AVs don't have to pass any such test. The second part of the safety assessment program is what we call a driving intelligence test. And this challenges the AV software with its ordinary driving scenarios in the driver's test. In the intelligence test, it's dangerous, diverse driving scenarios. Again, the ones that most often result in crashes, injuries, and deaths. So Terracin, which we talked about a minute ago, which is what allows you to bring virtual vehicles into the testing facility, into the testing environment, is the foundation of the Mcity Safety Assessment Program. The first real-world application of the program came, the city of Detroit won funding through the Michigan Mobility Collaborative to fund a driverless shuttle pilot in the city to serve the elderly and people with disabilities. And they called it Accessibility. And it is now operating. And so we put that vehicle, which was, I forgot, it was a minivan that was the AV technology, the AV stack, as they call it, was built by May Mobility, which is a company that is a spinoff of the University of Michigan College of Engineering. You disagree with me? Oh, okay, you're shaking your head. May Mobility, and so they're running that pilot now. We brought the vehicle into the test facility. We ran it through the driver's licensing test. There were, and we've run other commercial AV technology stacks through that same testing. There were maybe behavior issues that were identified that they then had to address before they went out in public with the City of Detroit shuttle. So this is really something that we are advocating, that the federal government do something to require AVs to pass some sort of a safety driving test, a safety test. At the moment, the federal government doesn't require any kind of specific testing related to safety. They have talked about and recently issued some guidelines, but they did not go so far as to call for some kind of a federal rulemaking or a test framework. So we're working hard on demonstrating the need for that and helping to make that happen. The Detroit shuttle addresses a pressing need in transportation in a different way, and that is the impact of transportation insecurity. And transportation insecurity, what that is in simple terms, is the inability to regularly get where you need to go because you don't have access to the resources you need to get there. be that bus fare, gas money, a friend who can drive you. And access to transportation is the greatest factor in escaping poverty. So this has not gotten the same kind of attention that the food security has, but we, Mcity, are hoping that we can help make a difference in that world. So we recently brought on to our leadership team Professor Alexandra Murphy, who is a professor of sociology. She has appointments in with ISR, the Population Studies Center at the Institute for Social Research. She also has an appointment with the Poverty Solutions Center in the Ford School, and she is our Associate Director for Social Science Research at Mcity. She developed what she calls the Transportation Security Index, which is a tool, questions that can be asked of a population to determine what the state of insecurity is. And she recently did that in the city of Detroit. It was applied in the city of Detroit. We published a white paper. And the headline finding of that was more than a third of residents of the city of Detroit experience transportation insecurity, which is significantly higher than the national figure. So a city then can take findings like that and say, okay, here's quantitative evidence that we need to do something. So Dr. Murphy, again, is on our staff. She has developed the TSI, Transportation Security Index. We are marketing it essentially to cities, communities, whoever might benefit from having it. And again, as I said, it's based on the Food Security Index, which has gained attention and has helped to drive change in making sure that food is available to people. Has it solved all the problems? No. But the first step is knowing what your problem is, knowing the scope of your problem. As important as transportation insecurity is transportation accessibility. So Mcity helps lead what's called the Accessible Mobility Collaborative, which is representatives from industry, from government, from U of M come together, and we study accessibility issues and talk about how those gaps can be closed. So my colleague, Vicki Waters, who is the assistant director of Mcity, and some of you may have met her on a tour, is the lead on that for Mcity. And there has been a lot of interest in the summits that she organizes, and we have started to make some headway toward making sure that this issue is as front and center as it should be. Because we need, as it says here, 1 in 5 Americans have a travel limiting disability. That doesn't mean you're necessarily, you don't have a leg or you don't have an arm, but you have something that makes it difficult for you to travel. And only 1 of those 5 are employed. 1 in 4 people are disabled, and we are all, as many of you probably know, aging into disability, where we can't get around as well as we used to. So this is another example of, yes, we're very focused on things like technology and data and simulation and vehicles, but we are also very interested in what is the impact on society. We want to have a positive impact on society. So I want to talk just briefly about a couple of other projects that are just in the starting phases. Depot autonomy, the mobility space is always changing. New challenges are identified, new technologies emerge, and so we're working on several projects that could reap significant benefits in the future. One of them is what we call Depot Autonomy, which is a research project working with one of our members, Noblies. And it's basically a case study in how you automate systems within a depot yard or a warehouse, which could dramatically improve efficiency, cut costs for the operation of that facility. So think Amazon, FedEx, UPS, where you have robots running around doing everything rather than humans. And yes, there are a whole other set of issues that can go with that. But we are building right now a sort of a mock-up, and that is a big tent that you see. It's like a Quonset hut, which our gentleman from Umtree may have seen in his years at Umtree, because it's attached to the building. Huge Quonset hut. And so we are building that truss system in there to represent what you would see in a warehouse type situation. And that truss system will be equipped with sensors and cameras and all the things that you need to operate autonomously. We also, again, back to data, we have created a data engine, the Mcity data engine, which is, again, open sourced for self-improving AI models. So that is most helpful to people who maybe don't have, large companies, large technology companies probably have the resources to build their own data engine, which is basically a processing tool. But if you're smaller, you work on your own, you're academic, maybe you don't have the resources, you can use our data engine to process your data. We are working in the city of Ann Arbor, we are deploying connected vehicle to everything technologies at 75 locations. That's not just intersections, but sometimes places along the side of the road. We're also helping Ann Arbor by capturing measurements related to near-miss accidents where cameras are already in place. Think roundabouts, for instance. We have a lot of technology at the infamous roundabout at State Street and Ellsworth. We're also expanding beyond the ground, or we're hoping to expand beyond the ground, and looking into uncrewed aircraft systems, also called UAS, think drones, and urban air mobility initiatives, think vertical, think electric. We have drawn the lines in the Mcity test facility for a vertiport at the north end. If those of you have been on a tour, we've been calling it the mobility circle north. Now there's painted lines there, and could serve as a vertiport. But that is in very early stages, but it is the next frontier that Mcity wants to engage in. And then we're also working to establish Mcity. We're a makerspace for connected and automated vehicles and technology, and we want to build that reputation as a makerspace for AI in transportation. AI, artificial intelligence, is driving so many things, and transportation is one of the major ones. And finally, as we look to the future, our focus is not just on technology. We are very committed to helping build the mobility workforce of the future. And we have two key initiatives that accomplish that. The Michigander Scholars Program, which is in conjunction with the Michigan Department of, the Michigan Development, MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation. I always forget what that stands for. MEDC, and other schools, including Michigan State, Michigan Tech, and more schools are joining, where students are awarded scholarships if they accept internships or jobs with participating companies and accept those jobs in the state of Michigan. So it is an effort to build the workforce here in Michigan, to provide jobs for our graduates, or to connect them with companies where they might be able to end up with full-time employment. The other thing that we're very much involved with is the Perot Jane Tech Lab at Mcity, which is an initiative through the College of Engineering Center for Entrepreneurship. It is a course that you can take as an undergrad or a grad student. And if you're selected for the course, you join the team of an emerging, up-and-coming mobility company that has a real-world problem it needs to solve and wants to use the resources available at Mcity and the University of Michigan to solve it. And so students join the teams from those companies and are able to get hands-on work. And you can see by the looks on their faces in that crew, that's in our garage at Mcity, they all find it to be a very, very valuable experience. We've had several go on to work for the companies that they were on the tech lab team with, or with companies they weren't on the team, but their tech lab experience enabled them to get a leg up on others. And that image on your right is one of our Michigander scholars. That is the scholars program I referenced. And he was going to work for GM. And so he's standing with his Hummer. So that is all I have for formal presentation. Thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them, any.
Any questions? Raise your hands. For our YouTube people, we need to use a mic. So I'll start here. Here's the closest.
One of the scariest things about AI technology is that some of the mistakes it makes are non-human, like driving under the truck that was painted with the sky advertisement, or sitting to wait for merge forever. And I think that part of the problem is just designing for knowing what you don't know and knowing that you're in a bad situation when you are in fact in a bad situation.
And I think that that is exactly what is at play with the safety assessment program and the driving intelligence test, where it is, divining scenarios that we might not think of ourselves, that are maybe wholly ridiculous. But everybody needs to feel confident that, we all drive and we get in situations where weird things happen, right? But we use our experience, our brain, our eyes, our ears, and we make decisions. We take all of that information in, like sensors. And so AI the idea is that AI will help us to enable AVs to do that consistently correctly. You're right, it is a big challenge, that is, but as Henry Liu, the director of Mcity, will say, Waymo just had an investigation was launched by NHTSA, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, just today, I think, that they are starting an investigation based on the collisions that resulted in Waymo issuing a recall yesterday. Those collisions were with like low scale gates, barriers, fences like that. So Henry Liu, our director of Mcity, was interviewed on NBC News last night, and he was asked about, when is this gonna work? When is this basically gonna happen? And he said, we have solved a lot of the challenges, but there are some basic science questions that are still out there. But I think, we have a vision into it. And he believes that we'll see broader deployment of AVs in the next 5 years. But only if we can get consumers on board as well. So AI is a tool. It's not a miracle, I guess is the way I'd put it. I
Yes.
remember you. You were on the
Yes,
tour.
I was on the tour, and I had wanted to see a vehicle going around
And I
the
still don't have one
Mcity.
with me.
So is it with all this virtual reality, you don't need to run the cars on the Mcity roads
No,
anymore?
we do have real vehicles that are AV, and they are used in testing. What we don't have, the research vehicles that we have are largely vehicles that have been bought from a dealership, and then our engineering team equips them to be autonomous vehicles. So there's a lot of money invested in that. One of those vehicles can cost $300,000, $400,000. So that's not something that we get out and just invite people to ride around in. As I mentioned on the tour last week, we used to have a driverless shuttle, and it carried about 12, 14 people. But old technology, the company that made them no longer exists. We can no longer support it. We are very much looking for ways to replace that vehicle, because we know that you need to see the vehicle, you need to ride the vehicle, you need to experience that. One thing research has shown is that after people actually experience riding in an autonomous vehicle, it can change their perspective immediately. You just forget that you're in one, and it starts to feel safe to you. Whereas before you've been in one, you kind of go, this just doesn't sound right. So we would very much like to get a vehicle that we can have available to have, because once we put one out there and you see it, well, can I get in it? No. So we'd very much like to be able to, and we thought we were going to get a Cruise from GM, and they are giving us one, but they're giving it to us non-operational. So it will be on static display.
vehicles you've had at the same time on the,
On the test facilities?
yeah.
Real or virtual? I think at one time we determined you could run, you know, a platoon of, I don't know, 50, 100, 200 vehicles in the test facility at the same time. You know, one of the benefits of autonomous technology in the trucking world is to run platoons, and you have your lead vehicle basically navigating for all of the autonomous vehicles behind it. They can stay closer together, they're more efficient, they save gas. But more likely, and the number of vehicles you can put in the test facility if you're talking about virtual vehicles, and keep in mind that the virtual vehicles, the technology allows those vehicles to interact and react with a real vehicle on the test facility. So we can put hundreds of virtual vehicles in the test facility. But it is unlikely in my lifetime, or maybe anybody's, that we'll ever put 100 vehicles out at the test facility at one time. Unless, you know, we have events that come through. We have coming up in June the SAE Auto Drive Challenge, and there are 17, 20 teams, student teams that come in. They each have a vehicle. They're working on developing a full autonomous vehicle. They're all working with each other at the same time out in the test facility. But we would accommodate if we had a large trucking company come and say, we want to bring a bunch of trucks in. We would do everything we can to accommodate that. So we don't really think of it. It's small. The test facility sits on a parcel of land that's about 36 acres. The test facility, the roads and the traffic lights and the infrastructure is about 16 or 18 acres. So it's small. Think about that in comparison to the American Center for Mobility down in Willow Run, which is about, I don't know, 250 acres. So if you wanted to run that kind of an experiment, you might in fact want to do it at ACM or someplace similar to that.
Do you ever think of setting up like 15 or 20-minute appointments for the public to come in and ride?
We used to do open houses when we first opened the test facility. But even then we didn't have the vehicles that we could put people in to ride. So we did walking tours, and we had a vehicle on display. It would be really challenging for us to set up appointments for people to come and ride because it's a working test facility. You know, so we have industry using it, academic researchers using it. It is, at the university, we have to pay for ourselves with the test facility, so there's a recharge rate that we have to pass on to, we'd have to charge people. It is not a bad idea, and we have talked about doing in not just Mcity, but possibly with other institutions or governments, you know, some kind of, they've done this, like the automakers have done this, where they go around the country and they let you try technology. So that's something that could potentially happen, but not something that we are close to making happen.
Two final questions.
I actually don't have a question. You're talking about people coming on board with it. We recently went to San Francisco, have a son who called a Waymo, unbeknownst to us, got in it. I'm like, oh my God. But shortly within a few minutes, it's really quite comfortable. So I can see, I had no interest in it, but once it was there, I got in, and it was pretty cool. And it's, as long as it works, but I know the hesitancy, so all I'm saying is experience was wonderful.
We saw that when we ran the Mcity driverless shuttle, which was also a pilot project that ran on a very small portion of North Campus. And it was a research project, and our goal was to find out, to learn more about consumer attitudes toward the technology after they had experienced it. We were, of course, looking at the technology, but we were most interested in the research. And the findings of that research was exactly what you just described. After they might have been apprehensive before, but once they rode in it and they saw that it was safe and that they were fine, then their acceptance of the technology went way up.
Right, final question.
So somewhere between 3 and 5 years ago in my neighborhood, which is basically bounded by Stadium Boulevard, State Street, Packard, you know, by the University, South Industrial, there were several autonomous vehicles practicing in that area, just running around crazy. White vehicles, green lettering, and I don't see them anymore. Do you know what happened? Because I swear people were taking them places, dropping them off at hotels.
Green and white, those were May mobility vehicles. They ran, and I don't know if they still do. They ran a shuttle service called A2Go. Mcity was a partner in that, and it ran between basically North Campus and South Campus into the athletic campus, with many, many stops along the way. And the home base, I also live in that same area, and home base was basically Stadium and State. And I don't know if they're still running it, but it turned into an on-demand service where you had to, get an app and call it, and then it would come, as opposed to, so I don't see them running around as much either. Yes. It is an autonomous vehicle. There's kind of two ways you can go autonomous. One is in a vehicle that still has a steering wheel and brakes, and so a human driver can take over if necessary. The May Mobility shuttle was one of those kinds of vehicles, so there was always a safety driver in it. Our Mcity driverless shuttle had a safety driver in it. The vehicle, the Waymo, doesn't have a safety driver, and it doesn't have, did it have a steering wheel? Okay. Then Zoox, which is another robo-taxi company, that's basically a box on wheels. No steering wheel, no brake, no opportunity for human intervention. So that's a next level.
Thank you very much, Sue.
Thank you very much.